Our gospel reading today comes from Luke chapter 12, verses 49 through 56. It's a continuation of what we've been reading through the past several weeks. Listen now and see if you hear a word from God. I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already ablaze. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, in what constraint I am under until it is completed. Do you think that I've come to bring peace on the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided. Father against son, and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you immediately say, it's going to rain. And so it happens. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, it's going to be hot. And it happens. You hypocrites. You know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? This is the word of the Lord. Please pray with me. God, I ask that the meditations of our minds and the words of my lips might be holy and acceptable to you this day, and might be for us a word, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. If I were to ask you all to imagine Jesus, if I asked you to close your eyes and picture the guy that we read about in the Gospels, Jesus of Nazareth, who went around preaching and teaching and healing, what images come to your mind? It's okay, you can do it. It can be interactive. Close your eyes and think of Jesus. Do you have a picture in your head? You have a mental movie? Okay. My guess, and I could be wrong, but my guess is that when challenged to think about Jesus, many of us think of children's Bible Jesus. Do you guys know children's Bible Jesus? Is that who you see? He has kind of fair skin and shoulder length hair that's got a little bit of wave to it that's dark, and maybe a thin beard. He's so nice. He holds kids and he cares for poor people. He probably buys groceries for old ladies who can't get out of the house. Or maybe you think of the Jesus we have back there, Constantine Jesus. Can you all see him? I know the Johnsons don't get to because they're too far back. But we have Jesus back there. I'm the only one who gets to see him most days. Maybe you think of that guy in the back of the sanctuary, robed in red velvet, hands out welcoming you and everyone else. Sunshine and bunnies and babies and old ladies. Jesus, what a lovely guy. My guess is that most of us, when asked to think about Jesus, do not imagine immediately a scene like today's. The Jesus in today's gospel lesson is not sunshine and bunnies and old ladies. The Jesus in today's gospel lesson is pissy and angry and maybe even hot-headed. He is ready to burn it all down. If we were to actually translate today's story into the vernacular, which we as Presbyterians claim we do, but rarely do because it's too much work, it might sound something more like, I am so sick and tired of this. I came to set the world on fire and I am ready to see it burn. Did you think I came to make nice? I didn't come to bring peace. I came to burn it down. You all will be divided. Fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, in-laws, all of you. I don't know why you can look at a cloud and know it's going to rain, but you can't figure out what's going on here. Y'all are such hypocrites. Today's Jesus is not sunshine and bunnies. He's mad. He's sick and tired of the hypocrisy and the injustice. He is so frustrated at people pretending to be something they aren't. He's just so sick of it. He's ready for it to be burned down. I like mad Jesus, actually, so long as he's mad at other people. It's easy for me to like mad Jesus when he's mad at other people. But often I forget it's I who he is mad at. Over the past several weeks, we've been looking at portions of this speech. A few weeks ago, we read the beginning of this speech, the beginning of this section when Jesus opened his speech by telling his disciples, "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy." And today, again, at the end of our portion, we have a condemnation of hypocrisy. You hypocrites. You know how to interpret the skies, but you can't interpret the time we're living in. This word hypocrite, like fire, comes up a lot in the Bible, a lot in the Gospels. And it's important for us to understand what it means, because it meant something slightly different in Jesus' time than how we use it. In our modern context, we usually use hypocrite to describe someone who says something but does something else, right? And that's close to how Jesus had used it. But in his time, it was closer to how it originally was used, which meant to be an actor or a pretender. A hypocrite is a thespian, someone who would put on a mask and play a part. Beware the person who pretends. Their yeast, it spreads and grows. But what happens when we stop pretending? When we stop playing a part and instead live authentically? That is what Jesus is calling for, but it is also what leads, he says, to division, to loss. Pick up your cross and follow me. Take off your mask and follow me. Care about the things you say you care about. Care about the things I care about. Live authentically. Stop pretending to be religious and actually be religious. That is what Jesus is saying to his disciples and to the people who are gathered around. Those things sound really easy in theory, but in actuality, Jesus' invitation to follow him will lead to division. So many of us want to just go along and get along, and so we put on masks of congeniality, of friendliness, of peaceableness, right? Mothers and fathers do it with their sons and daughters. Sons and daughters do it with their mothers and fathers. In-laws do it, colleagues do it, community members do it. We all spend so much time faking it just to keep the peace. And we do it for good reason, because we know that the moment we stop faking it, the moment we stop play acting, the moment we stop pretending everything is fine, the moment we live into our real truth, we risk dividing our personal relationships, our families, our communities. But isn't that what Jesus is calling us to do? You hypocrites, why can't you see the moment you're living in? Jesus is calling the people he's speaking to take off their masks, to live into the truth. Live in the truth. But that is terrifying because it leads to division. We know that intrinsically. Anybody who's ever tried to get along with their mother-in-law knows that intrinsically. And that division is precisely, unfortunately, what keeps so many of us from doing it. We want to live in the truth, but we're afraid to live in the truth, so we don't. We keep on play acting. For some of us, taking up our cross will lead to a metaphorical death. A death of what once was, a death of things we once relied on or held familiar. Maybe it leads to a death of a relationship in our family system, or a death of a friendship in our community system. When we live into our truth and take off our mask, sometimes it leads to metaphorical death. For others, it leads to literal death. On the cover of today's bulletin, I put a picture of St. Ignatius of Antioch, I think that's the guy, because I thought it was funny. He was martyred by being fed to lions. It's not funny, but it's a good coloring page for today. It's hard to find coloring pages for today. But I also put it on there because I think it's good for us to be reminded of what was at stake for the disciples and the church followers that came after them. They did not die happy, sunshine bunny Jesus from the children's story deaths. They were martyred. Paul was crucified upside down. They were stoned. They were cut in two, like the text from Hebrews tells us. That is, for some, what happens when we take off our play masks and live as Jesus is calling us to live. Fighting for justice, giving a rip about the poor, caring for the widow or the orphan or the woman in an abusive relationship, paying attention to the people who are overlooked, for the homeless man who sleeps on our church steps, or the kid who comes to school with bed bugs and an empty stomach. Sometimes taking up those crosses of mercy and justice and love and living into that calling is dangerous or divisive or worse. So how do we make sense of the Jesus who loves everyone, the Jesus who promotes community, the Jesus from the children's Bible, and this Jesus who seems to be calling for us to burn it all down? How do we make sense of it with this Jesus who seems to be endorsing a situation in which we end up divided from one another? A few minutes ago, I asked you to imagine how you would describe Jesus. What is the mental picture you have? Most of us think of a Jesus who is loving and caring and full of light. Perhaps the message of today's text is that when we reconcile our truths with God's truths, we can love one another without needing to be approved of by them. We can love our parents or our siblings or our coworkers or our community members whenever they are and whoever they are. But it does not mean that we have to endorse or sit silently by the things that they do or believe that we don't agree with. He doesn't say there won't still be love between these people. There will be division. We can love them without needing to be approved by them. And conversely, we can disagree with how they see Jesus or how they see our role in the world, and they may disagree with how we see it. The world is full of people who disagree with how to interpret Jesus. But Jesus seems to be calling us to interpret him, to take a stand, and to live authentically into that. We can love one another without needing the approval of one another. The hypocrisy of life, I think the hypocrisy that is making Jesus crazy in the moment he's speaking of, is the hypocrisy of wanting everybody to like us, wanting everybody to get along, wanting everybody to think everything's okay. The hypocrisy is pretending to be okay with everyone and everything. Jesus is not actually okay with the religious leaders who have used their power to alienate the other or the people they deem less worthy. He's not okay with it. Jesus is not actually okay with the wealthy classes who have used and abused the poor to gain power and status and wealth while children and widows go hungry. Jesus is not actually okay with people who claim to be religious, who claim to follow and care about the laws of God. Maybe they go to church every week and put the 10 Commandments up in their classrooms or in their dining rooms, but ignore the plight of the homeless and the hungry and the widowed and the orphan, walking by the people who are begging for help. Jesus is not actually okay with that. He's begging for people to stop pretending they care and to actually care. He's begging for people to stop pretending they want change and actually make change. So today, let us hear his invitation. Let us resolve to stop worrying about our own lives or how people will perceive us, our own reputations, our own desires for our approval, our own desire to keep the peace and live like Jesus and the disciples and the apostles who followed. Not out of a desire to keep the peace, but out of a desire to live the truth. Today and this week and always, let us take off the masks. Let us stop pretending to be religious and actually be religious. And let us let the cards fall as they may. We are not here to make peace. We are here to honor and glorify the living God as we serve our God and our neighbor. Amen.